I have a couple other data sets to show that may be of interest to somebody who wants to add something weather related to their story or build a theme or a map or a short essay around what we can do in the web, the WebGIS around weather data. One particularly interesting example of weather data that's available is a compendium of tornado tracks for the whole United States produced by NOAA, and searching for that gives a fewer than hundreds of thousands, but still a surprising number of tracks. So two items, side items, which are useful about searching for data. One of them is it's kind of an art that one develops over time, the ability to pick the most useful keywords, and experience helps one to eventually track down data sets more quickly from amongst the mass of data in the cloud. And I'm sure, as I've said before, there's a great opportunity in having access to all this data out there in the universe, but also there's the problem of finding the piece of data that you actually want from among that huge universe of data. And it's an art. Another thing that is very useful is to look at the user who provided the particular data set. Federal User Community is a very, very good data site. It's actually a committee of federal government scientists who pick various data sets and carefully load them up. So it's very reliable data. Things that are done by what are obviously individuals may or may not be as good. They may be very specific and not useful to you. They may be experiments on that person's part and not be very good. So we tend to look for more reliable or more familiar names of people. Sometimes another method is once you find a particular user who seems to be very, very good at putting up important data in a very clean, effective, and well-supported way, then you can sort of search among that person's data. That's useful. For the moment, I'm going to use something from the Federal User Community of tornado tracks in the United States, and that will be here momentarily. Always do hate it when things don't move smoothly during a demo, but I'm getting better with my pause button to save the time. So what's happened is this whole data set of tornado tracks, every known or identified or measured tornado and their track from 1950 until quite recently, and we would check the metadata to discover the exact details, is plotted in this data set. So the ArcGIS seems to be a little slow today zooming in, but the more one zooms in into this data set, the more or the smaller the tornado scale values are that show, and the more tracks that actually show. So as one zooms in more and more, we begin to get a much better idea of tornado tracks. So these are the tracks, the tornadoes, and this is just a really wonderful data set and beautifully presented. As an idea for a story map, I would conceive one thing that would pop into my head. I mean, a story could be told just off of this data and illustrated, and it makes a beautiful map. Just the discussion of where tornadoes occur, what their paths tend to be, why that is. A meteorologist could build a very nice instructional story map out of that. But what I might think of would be to go back to another old reliable data set that we've discovered, the Social Vulnerability Index. And this could perhaps even show some indication for us of whether it's really true that tornadoes do hit trailer parks. And whilst that is sort of a humorous anecdote about tornadoes hitting trailer parks, there is a lot of truth to it, in that in many cases it has been found that people who are socially vulnerable, are poorer, have other disadvantages in life, are more susceptible to natural disasters, as I talked about in the earthquake example earlier in the semester. Maybe that's also true for tornadoes as well, and it's not just a kind of a joke or a product of the fact that a Category 1 or a Fujita 1 or 2 tornado will destroy a trailer park but leave a well-built neighborhood mostly intact. So we can actually turn on the Social Vulnerability Index mapping and see what results this would show if it does ever show up. Again, it's tough to do live demos. I'm going to pause this just on the hope that it might show up in time to finish the video. And it finally came up, and obviously to make a nice map product out of something like this, it would take a bit of effort at symbology, finding a few key spots where whatever effect one wants to demonstrate is clearer. But we can see that there are areas of varying social vulnerability, and we'll see whether, and one could speculate at the very least in this story map about whether the areas that seem to be hit by tornadoes are areas that are less able to deal with it, or perhaps identify areas of social vulnerability that intersect with significant tornadoes. And that could be, this story could be something that maybe doesn't reach a conclusion, but at the very least presents an idea for research and development of that concept. So I'll close with that idea.